Buses are short, classes are hot, teachers are scarce, and your kids are already exhausted. If it's back to school and it feels like back to stress, there is a different way to start the year, and it begins at home. Welcome to the Parent-Educator Project. Grow yourself to grow your kids. I'm Dr. Blake Willard, founder of the Homeschool Mastery Group, and let's get into it. Today, we're talking about some educational news. And if you live in a hot place like myself, school is back in action already for those in the public school district. Las Vegas started school this Monday, August 11th, and parents are already juggling the early mornings, high temps, and a lot of logistical issues. Yeah, yesterday was 111. I mean, I went outside at 2 in the morning to let the dog out. It was still over 100 degrees. It's a rough time to get in a new routine, to have to do recess outside, which is usually where kids prefer to do recess. But yeah, so a lot of challenges with getting started. I'm not gonna lie, I heard a parent talking about on Monday. I was at the chiropractor, and there was a parent talking about sending their fifth grader to school, and it just dawned on me that even though it's the hottest part of the summer, school had started already. Public schools are back in action, and a little part of me cried. I felt bad for that family, for that child. The idea of sending them away, right? This back to school thing, there's so much pressure built into it. And, you know, I think there's a lot of parents that would like to cut that routine out of their life. Possible, possible. Other issues, there's transportation troubles, and it's leading to family stress. Bus capacity, driver shortages are biting again in a whole bunch of different regions across our country, Florida, Colorado, Ohio, to name a few. And it's creating delays in schools, right? Route cuts. In Ohio, there's a transportation law prioritizing non-public students. Approximately 2,000 high schoolers in Dayton start the year without buses. So, I mean, this is just another example of how, we'll create an educational policy and it goes whoosh, right to the other side from some other extreme that is correcting, creates this whiplash in parents, and ultimately it's not the systems that are affected, it's the parents that ultimately end up having to deal with these issues. So, you know, beware of public policy when it comes, especially to public education. And it's always, the boots on the ground, or in this case, the wheels on the road that are affected, and ultimately the parents and the kids that have to deal with it the most. Yeah, so again, it's funny. We just started school, but because of heat warnings, there's already early releases going on in some districts. So if you're out west like I am, Clark County School District, it's hot and issues with power. Basically, I have this nice low 70s temperature set in my house right now, and we don't have to leave it. So I know there's a lot of winter regions around our country where it's a long, atrocious winter, and we're kind of the opposite here. It's a long, atrocious summer. Um, Cool thing about homeschooling is you can kind of use the seasons to work for you. There's a best time to be outside, and that's not when I want to be indoors doing school. And I always feel bad for kids because the most beautiful seasons of the entire year, no matter where you live, are spring and fall. And those get eaten up by 8-hour school days where kids are away from the home and not able to do what's the most enjoyable, what they most want, or even what's the most productive. And so, these temperature extremes only remind me because while much of the hardship of the heat for us or the cold for others is spent in class time with a lot of students, much of the best part of the year is spent in class time with a lot of students. And as home educators, you can fix your program, your schedule around when it makes sense for you. You don't have people will jump into homeschooling and they will start when the school starts because that's what they're used to and that's what everyone else is doing. I would not recommend that. I would start when you're ready to start, and I would adapt your schedule so that the best times of the year are when you are outside, outdoors. Have you ever been to, let's say, a theme park on an off day when there's like nobody there? It's fantastic. right? Every field trip you ever do as a home educator should be on an off day. Why would you go on the weekend? Why would you go on a Memorial Day? Go when no one is there. And it's only an issue when the public schools are released. So at this time, I hope the world jumps into home education. But at least at this time, while the vast majority of the population is still in public school, plan a calendar so that you can enjoy the best things when they're doing other things, right? Just to keep it positive. Uh, this is just one of those advantages of home education that we don't always think about. But some people completely reverse their breaks and their schedule from what the school is doing. Some people do year round at an easy pace. But point is, right now for us, when it's hot, we're going to do a lot of indoor learning, books, music, play inside, creativity. And when it gets nice, we're not going to be stuck up in the house. We're not going to be stuck up in a classroom. We're going to be going to the park. We're going to be doing some in-person learning somewhere else because we want to take advantage of it. So something to think about. Sleep problem and why your teen is cranky. The AAP recommends 8:30 a.m. or later for middle high school start times. Well, many districts, maybe even most districts, are starting far earlier than that. I know when I was in school, it was 7 a.m. Did not enjoy that. And there's a predictable fatigue amongst students. Morning battles, right? It creates issues for the students, which create issues for the teachers, which create issues for the parents, and it creates this snowball effect. I think the data's been pretty well out there for a long time that we know as children's bodies and minds are changing, particularly as they approach kind of later adolescence and their teenage years, they have a tendency and a need to sleep longer, and they also have a tendency to sleep later. And this is not, it's not rebellion. It's just a part of their wiring. And if we will never accommodate that, we're always fighting a battle uphill of getting them to bed and getting them up and fighting fatigue. And that cycle continues over and over again. And I mean, there's so many issues when it comes to a lack of sleep for health, for growth, for clarity of mind. And so think about all the things that we're denying our students at a time when it's probably the most stressful part of their education to date, simply because schools cannot align with a child's development. If you got multiple children and some of them are teenagers, it is 100% okay for you to accommodate their sleep schedules. Not unreasonable, you set expectations, but you can allow your older students or those ones that are just late risers to sleep in while you get the day started with the younger students. You can have a rolling routine where things start to unfold within kind of the alignment of your child's physical and developmental needs. And a lot of times it's a lot less stressful for parents. Like I've got one client, she's got one child that just cannot wake up for his life. He rolls out of bed groggy and slow. And another one, boom, first thing in the morning, maybe even before the sun rises. And so because of that, she gets her independent time, her bonding time with that early riser in the morning, gets him started, gets him moving into independence so that when the next one comes up, she can be with him, attend to him, kind of help him warm up, roll him in, and then gets more independent time when this one is ready to like go down and take a rest or do some independent work. And it ends up working very smoothly, even though she has multiple children that she's homeschooling at the same time. So let's talk about the price tag of free school. NRF 25, K through 12 families budget 143.77 for supplies, 169.13 for shoes, 249.36 for clothing, 295.81 for electronics before fees, activities, commuting. So, I've said this a lot lately. The average cost of homeschooling for a family that like a family will spend per student on homeschooling for the entire year around $600. Well, let's do that math. 150, about 300, 550. Oh my goodness, we're over $800 already. Right? So when we think about the cost of homeschooling, you send your children to free school, public school, it's not like there's no cost. There's commuting, right? There's supplies, there's clothing, and it's not that you don't get those things for your children if you're homeschooling. It's just those things are included in the total cost of homeschooling. And sometimes we feel the need every year to do a wardrobe change as our children are going back to school. I know we were like that. We would talk about our new clothes budget for the new school year. Um, it doesn't have to be that way, right? So you can just spend a little more strategically. And if it doesn't, again, think about your calendar, have to align with the back to school start time, then you don't have to deal with all the jacked up prices, right? What a lot of families do is they wait for everyone else to clear out when that season ends, and then they go get everything for 10 cents when the stores are trying to clear off their shelves to move into the next thing. So, I think public education gets pegged as free, but actually it's the most costly in like so many different ways. There's the expenses to you of just being prepared to participate in public education, and then there's the expenses of each of our taxation when that money is not spent wisely. And it is the most expensive system per child. Like they're spent so much on facilities, on administration, on more administration, on some teachers as well. And does it fix the issues? No. That's honestly why a lot of us are talking about home education. So something to think about. And then there's this ongoing attendance problem in public education, chronic absenteeism. It's improved since COVID, right? There's a lot of kids that just kind of fell off the map during COVID. I think there's still thousands of students that are essentially unaccounted for that just stopped going to school. So someone should definitely look into that. But a lot of students just weren't showing up kind of day in and day out, especially when school was online. Kind of hard to pull up the motivation when you're in your jammies and you're groggy and you're depressed and you're feeling lonely to pull up the Zoom screen and get a lecture about PE, right? So for a lot of students, they were just dropping off. But the thing is, it's gotten better, but it's still significantly worse than in prior years. National analysis plus Nevada's 25 to 26% last year, right? So homeschool, yeah, it's gotten bad. So basically, there's a huge segment of the population that's missing over a month of school every year, sometimes more. In a 10-month cycle, that's a tenth of their cumulative education, and it's not like that's just being returned to them. And a lot of this has to do with attitude and issues with the idea of belonging, right? You don't have to convince your child to show up to something that they love and are passionate about, do you? Or that they enjoy. They will tell you, right? If you're planning on going vacation, they'll tell you where you're going. You don't have to beg them to show up. The reason kids aren't showing up is the things going on in schools, the stressors, the bullying, the weird stuff, right? The sense of identity and belonging. A lot of kids will be surrounded by others, but feel completely alone. Homeschooling allows us to give our children a sense of belonging and identity that a lot of times they're lacking. Again, we are the loneliest generation probably in world history, but we have more people than the world's ever known. How is that possible? Well, more proximity does not mean more closeness, right? It does not mean more cultural, like belonging or identity. It does not mean a greater sense of community. We have way less community. We're way more fragmented and disconnected, partially a byproduct of devices and social media. And like we have a culture that's constantly moving and shifting. And so because of that, people are just more separated from the people that they live next to. This is true in schools too. Your children, if you go to public school or traditional school even, are surrounded by other students, but it doesn't mean that they have a sense of closeness or belonging or identity with those students. Homeschooling can fix this. Why? Because the relationship that matters most, which is the parent-child relationship for their development and their well-being, is not being fractured by a unnatural split that sends them away and they basically have to figure it out for themselves for the most of the day, for most of the week, for most of the year. Well, it allows them to have a sense of belonging and identity that's rooted in a family identity and culture that does not constantly force separation where it doesn't belong. And so if your children are struggling with something, the parent who loves them and has a close relationship recognizes that and addresses that and draws them in. And it creates a sense of, again, belonging and togetherness that our students need, that your child needs. And it pretty much fixes the attendance problem, besides the fact that your kids can't just not show up to home. They're already there and they can't really fake it, right? But you can accommodate them when they need change, right? There are some days where everyone's just out of it, and we're going to take our schedule and we're going to set it off to the side and say, we'll pick this up tomorrow. Today we're going on a field trip, on an outing. We're going to spend some family time together. We're going to do some spring cleaning. All of these can be just good opportunities to know yourself and know your child and create the change that everybody's needing. So again, let's talk about the homeschool contrast. System playbook. Earlier alarms, car line chaos, heat release warnings, sub coverage. You know what? We didn't talk about that one. We missed one. And that's a big one. Classroom shortages. uh, Teacher shortages are a consistent issue in public education right now. It's particularly true in Clark County School District, where I am, where school districts do not have enough staff to fill classes, so classes are being overfilled. And teacher requirements are descending to lower and lower standards. They are allowing high school graduates who could be a year out of school with no college experience, for whatever that's worth, but basically almost peers, to come in as substitutes. They sign some paperwork and they're not the teacher, but then because of these shortages, a lot of these are turning into long-term subs. So you have a 19-year-old subbing with 16, 17-year-olds. It doesn't make a lot of sense. This person may not have the social and emotional and intellectual development that someone would hope and require for the quality education that these kids deserve, but there's just not enough. And besides that, so there's a teacher shortage. There's also a student shortage, because we have millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. Millennials was kind of the last large producing generation. And then, my generation, millennials, 2008, like housing crisis and the financial crisis that happened there. Economists were predicting there was going to be a child shortage because there was this huge period of financial uncertainty for years that people were struggling to come out of, when they would normally be going into the workforce and all these other things, starting families. And so they were predicting there's not going to be a lot of kids. There's going to be a window when there's no babies. And that's what we saw. And so Gen Z, I think, is like 20 or 30 million less total population than the millennials. And then Gen Alpha, which is the youngest kids that are coming up right now, it's like the lowest on record since the Great Generation. Um, it's like 40 million students. So there's this huge gap where it's like 30 million less children that are school age than my generation. That's a large number, which means there's a lot of public school facilities that won't have students to fill those facilities, despite their cost, despite the maintenance. And so I honestly think as these next years come up, we just passed this last high school year was the last largest high school graduating class. Every year that comes after will descend. So every year from now on until who knows when, how long it will take for our population to go in the other direction, we're going to see shortages of students in classrooms, which is obviously going to directly translate to college attendance and admissions. I think we need to wise up because things are already changing. And the parents that are producing more children and raising up another generation often share different kind of values that lead them into places like homeschooling, for instance. So that's not going to affect us. But as more and more people are pulling out of the school system, for instance, homeschooling, fastest growing educational trend in America, it's going to keep going that way. Well, school choice programs pulling more students out of public schools, lack of population pulling more students out of public schools. These schools are going to be vacant, right? That's going to be a huge issue. So besides the fact that right now there's not enough teachers, later on there's not going to be enough teachers or students. And well, best of luck. That's going to be tough on them, but we want to be prepared. That will literally never affect you as a home educator. So, but it is something that we should be aware of culturally and nationally, because it's going to affect a lot of people, and those are still our neighbors. Those are still our society, and we want to take care of them too. So, anyways, let's get back. Earlier alarms, car line chaos, heat release warnings, sub coverage, and supply lists that keep growing. So these are some of the things that we're talking about on the school side, the traditional school side. Let's talk about us. Let's talk about home educators and what we can do. Well, I'm a huge advocate for the mission, values, goals framework, which is building your homeschool program around the values of your family, having a clear mission that guides where you're going, values that ground you and move you forward towards your mission, and then goals that you can set as milestones and like signposts that show you you're making progress, that show you you're moving forward. A lot of parents struggle with confidence. Can I do it? I'm not equipped. I don't have a teaching degree. Well, if you set a goal and you have a clear mission and clear values, and you're moving towards that goal while you form the character in your children that you hope to see them form, you're having a very successful homeschool. Far better than any traditional school or public school or private school, in my opinion. So, uh, when we start to focus around our students and our needs rather than the systems that we have to fit them in, we change our routines. So making routines, I already talked about this a little bit. When is the right time for wake up? Can we have staggered wake up depending on the needs of our children, right? If the weather is an issue, well, let's work when it's, you know, uncomfortable outside and do what we need to do. And when the weather is nice, let's adjust our schedule to make sure we take advantage of those times. There's also a lot of like co-ops and kind of micro cohorts at home that are forming where parents are coming together with other like-minded parents. And instead of, again, let's say you're a family as home educators where both parents work or you have a little bit of an inflexible schedule where people are coming together with like-minded families and they're fixing their mutual problems by serving each other's children within the context of their homes. So you may not be able to do everything all day, every day of the week, but you can create a formula with a community of people who you share values with where you can do this together, right? And then there's multi-age lessons with different rubrics. So again, you don't have to spend all day homeschooling. You can adjust your lessons with different standards so that everybody fits within your teaching time and instruction time without having to spend the entire day sitting down going through another curriculum. And then it's just think about the costs going into public school, both for parents and the institution as a whole. It's redirecting what we would otherwise be spending on materials and clothing and shoes and transportation and redirecting it towards what matters to us and our family. Rather than buying things that you have to buy, why don't you buy the things that you need and want to buy in order to facilitate a healthy and productive home education with your children? So, a couple of key takeaways. I would recommend each of you writes your back to learning plan, right? So you may be, as a homeschooler, a year-round learner. You may be starting along the same similar lines as a traditional school, or you may have a schedule that's completely inverted from what the school system is doing. But since we're in that back to school season, it's good to remember, let's have a plan for when we're jumping full steam back into learning. Start times aligned with our energy peaks, right? A schedule that's aware of our weather systems. Um, Remembering that we don't have to commute and so we're buying time back. How can we use that time more effectively? And then map each choice to a value, right? If you as a family put a lot of value in diligence or stewardship or joy or health, then start to attach those values to the things that your kids are doing, because when it comes to learning, it doesn't matter what subject you're learning. If you are values minded as a family, every single subject should be able to perfectly marry with the values that you hold, right? And if you're teaching something that's in contrast with your values, you can look at it as an object lesson, but if it's in contrast with your values, you don't necessarily have to teach that thing. It could be the curriculum's not in alignment. It could be the subject itself um, maybe is propagating a worldview that you fundamentally disagree with. So yeah, let's start to think about those things. You're going to get a lot of time back, right? Transportation, you're going to save on transportation costs. You're going to save on commute times. You're going to save on some of the stressors. I know for us, getting to church on Sunday mornings on time is so hard, right? So if I did do that like 6 or 7 days a week because of our schedule, I would not like that at all. Um, and so a lot of you do. And so you can kind of do an audit of your transportation, what your stress triggers are, and ask, What if those hours became reading aloud or nature studies or project times? All right, so remove that period and insert something better in its place. And then reallocate resources. Let's do a cost swap. Instead of spending stuff on, you know, materials and things that are not necessarily what you want, move it into high yield tools like manipulatives or library cards or museum passes, things that add a lot of value to your homeschool. Instead of, um, clothing or uniforms, think of a simple capsule wardrobe, right? It's just a few things that your children can rotate through that are appropriate dress for your home education. Some people do PJs. I'm of the mindset that I want my child to come dressed like I want them to think and act, right? I don't go to a business interview, or a live presentation dressed in my PJs. And so I want my child to come to work with their job as their education, ready to learn. So my mindset. And then instead of buying electronics, maybe we can have a shared device in a distraction controlled environment. Maybe we have one particular tool that we use for applications for specific subjects and learning. But other than that, you just don't need as much of everything, and it's gonna get you some of that back. And then belonging, we're replacing attendance, we're replacing forced, you know, peer cohabitation with family, parents, time together, quality time. So give your child a sense of belonging. If that's something that you're kind of undoing from how school has been for them and you're moving into home education, take more time to focus on the relationship and ease into the academics. There's nothing wrong with that, because if your child has trust in the relationship that you have with them, it will translate to all the other things. So build trust, build relationship. I always say, you can't withdraw from an empty bank account. So put money in the relationship bank with your children so that you have more to withdraw from when it's time to do something hard or be challenged. You have something to withdraw. All right. So, yeah, there's a lot, there's so much more that we go through, but I think we're going to wrap this one up. Couple things to think about. What's one part of the back to school season that stresses your home out most? What are some things that you can do to change that? If you could reclaim your commute time, how would you use your week? All right, so if that part was completely cut out and you wanted to put something fruitful in its place, how would you do that? And then what value do you want every lesson to reinforce this month? So think about your values if you haven't. Identify them as a family, uh, and start to see, how can I attach our values to this lesson, to this study, to this curriculum. And you're going to start getting more out of what you're teaching. You'll feel better about it, and you'll feel better about what your kids are learning. So a couple things. Join our free Start Homeschooling community. School.com/homeschooling. It's in the link in the bottom of this video. Skool.com/homeschooling. It's our free community for parents who are interested in getting started homeschooling, who have done it, who are just looking for support and resources. There's hundreds of families there, and I'd love to see you there too. Subscribe to our newsletter. All right, each week we send out encouragement. We talk about different aspects of home education, and it's a high value newsletter. I think you'll get a lot out of it. So I'd love for you to check that out. And then again, if you need help forming a plan where you're getting out of the schooling mindset, unschooling yourself from what's not working, and creating a form, a habit, a rhythm, a pattern specific to the needs of your family, you want that kind of personalized education that guarantees success for you and your children, then you need to book a discovery call. Again, the link is below, and each and every day, parents are succeeding because they've set themselves up for success. So if you don't feel like you have a plan that's going to guarantee success for your family, then book a discovery call and let's chat about how to customize your home education to work for the needs of you and your children. And yeah, if you like this, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Share it with a friend who you think this would be the right fit for. And I look forward to the next episode. This has been the Parent Educator Show. So can't wait to talk soon. And we'll see you on the next one.